stop talking on this on the video on the Facebook. Right.
That's never gonna happen ever.
Okay.
We are always going to be
pushing
talking.
it. It's pushing it.
All right. I can see live.
It says live
we're
now.
live on here. So
Cool.
everybody.
Right, I'm off again. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Carla, in case anybody is live watching us. So welcome everybody, all of our lovely people that join us on a Wednesday for Jane and Mel's chat. And this week we've got lovely Rachel back from Southampton, isn't it?
Hi, Rachel.
So you are coming from an estate agency point of view, just to remind people in case there's anyone new, and you do sales and lettings and everything.
I don't do lettings. We only deal with sales, and we're here on the South Coast.
Perfect.
Beautiful part of the world.
First time joining us today, Charlotte Jeffrey Campbell, who is from the Able Agent.
Hi, Charlotte.
You are a supplier to the industry, but very important because you help people to train. So you can talk to us and to the people out there about the importance of why they should go to an agent who knows what they're talking about. And that's really going to be our sort of topic this week now, isn't it? That we've got a few little things that have come up throughout the week that we wanted to talk about and chat with you.
Yeah,
so Mel,
sure.
if you want to run through those, that'd be brilliant.
Thank you. That's great. Cheers, Jane. Hi, guys. So look, what we are doing, obviously, every Wednesday at 5, we're looking to kind of have some industry specialists talk about what consumer stories are right out there in the world right now. So one of the kind of core ones is about the number of complaints about estate agents that have gone into the property redress scheme. Now it's gone up by about just over 50%. So it's a significant increase over last year. And really, I guess, you know, anybody looking on, particularly consumers, are going to wonder why that is. So what do we think is the real reason for that happening? Rachel, what's your take?
Oh, my take is that possibly there are agents who've been drawn into redress who might not have been in redress before, combined with a more educated client. And I say educated in terms of their consumer knowledge, that they feel that, you know, you have the right to return things, you have the right for Amazon to pay you back if they don't deliver, you have the right to all of these kind of small redresses in the consumer sphere. And they have very high expectations of estate agents. And they think that if their sale doesn't go through, that is the agent's fault because that's the person they're dealing with. So I think there's possibly an element of that it's like a delivery connotation where we're supposed to deliver, we didn't deliver, we're at fault.
So it's a cultural kind of thing where actually people are much more sort of trigger happy on the complaints. Is that what you think, Sean?
I don't think it's just trigger happy on complaints. I think it's a higher expectation of customer service that we have as consumers now, because we expect things to happen quickly and we expect them to be done properly. And I think we're much quicker to respond if we don't feel like we've got the right service. And I think the thing that's interesting when you talk about complaints and what I do as training agents is, a lot of the time, the consumer, you guys, don't really understand quite how many laws and procedures we have to follow. So I can see there being a number of complaints that come from either the consumer isn't as up to date with what we have to do and holds us responsible where we're not, but also there's an element of the consumer is getting more knowledgeable about the laws. So I think there's almost two extremes perhaps in the industry.
I think as well we've got to take into consideration that we have had a big period of time where a lot of people have been at home and perhaps had more time on their hands than maybe they would have done before, because, you know, let's face it, the amount of time that it takes to complain, write the letters, go backwards and forwards and all that, if you're busy and you're commuting and you're off to work and all the rest of it, then it's, you know, sometimes you just let it go. And obviously while you're sitting at home and you've got time on your hands, then why not? Let's have a go. But yeah, definitely the other things, we've had a hell of a lot of new agents joining the redress scheme because it's now the law. So for any consumers out there, you know, the estate agents didn't have to belong to redress schemes. So those that chose to were normally the agents who didn't have any reason not to. And the agents that didn't join were the ones that did have reason not to, but now they have to join. So, you know, we're bound to see a spike because obviously we understand that in our industry there are some agents that are great, and as in any industry there's some that really are shocking, but they all have to belong now. So kind of like a mixture of the lot, really, isn't it?
What you were saying about everyone having time on their hands, I think that's also possibly there's been failures in communication. An awful lot of the whole of the front end of estate agency and the back end in conveyancing completely ground to a halt. And if you've got no one calling you, no one letting you know what's happened, and you just feel you've been left in a hole, then you are going to feel that.
And add to that, I think that time period we've been through has been very stressful, but also so's moving house. And I know anecdotally, talking to a lot of my agent contacts, is a lot of the sales of property at the moment are not necessarily for positive reasons. There's separations. There's a lot of people moving in together because it's a great time to now, I've missed my partner, I'll move in with you. But there's also a scenario where perhaps I want to kill you and I'd like to sell the house now. So I think not all of it's a nice period of time. And I think that's traditional with agents, isn't it? We get stuck in what are quite often very difficult scenarios between two parties selling, and that can lead to complaints because there might be a difference of viewpoint from both parties. And that's always the hardest job, isn't it? As an agent, you want to do your best.
It's meeting everyone's needs.
We're picking in the middle, aren't we? You can't please everybody, and that's the unfortunate thing. And we are working, primarily we're working for our landlords and for our vendors. So, you have to be looking at it from their point of view, because we have to work as them, really. And so therefore you can't always please the person that, perhaps has a valid point, but at the end of the day, we can only pass on what our client has told us to pass on. So, it is very difficult. And I think it's been just a stressful time. I mean, when we all first went into lockdown, then we kind of adjusted to it. But that first couple of weeks, I felt like really under pressure. We didn't know what was happening. Suddenly everything had stopped, and, everybody, you felt like you had the world on your shoulders with worry. So I can imagine that must have caused a hell of a lot more, because people were just thinking, some agents just closed, didn't they? They just went, and there was no even notification to the people, their clients. They just had to close their doors, and it was pretty much overnight. So I think there's a lot of reasons to that, Mel. It'll be interesting to see what happens next year. I
think that was going to be the next point, was actually, so now everybody's got to be in the redress, so everybody is essentially exposed to rightfully some form of complaint mechanism, should they so need
good for people. To be honest, good. Let the people complain, because they now have a very, very good place to complain to. And what that will do is it will clean up the industry, because we genuinely believe that the agents, certainly the agents that we deal with on here, are fabulous agents. They're the people that are doing things in the right way, and that care about all of their clients that they deal with. But as I say, it's there are others, unfortunately, that don't work in that same way. So
that's why they've all.
Hopefully they'll go.
That's why they've been scooped into.
I was going to say, the biggest reason for complaints, whenever we look at when we analyse the complaints from the consumer, it's communication, and everything tends to stem down to communication. So I suppose my advice to the consumer is, don't feel like you can't bother us. Don't feel like you can't pick up the phone and speak to us if you're concerned or worried or something's not happening. Sometimes we're busy and there's a lot going on in an office, and we're notoriously short-staffed a lot of the time because we're so busy and there's not enough people on the seats. So don't be afraid as a consumer to literally say, look, and keep pressurizing us for an answer. If you feel like you're not hearing us, challenge us. I think most agents would have to say, Yeah,
I think one area where I think people might feel that they have complained, which has happened over this period of time, is with chains collapsing. And we've had a chain collapse where we were at the top, things have happened down below, and someone says, well, why on earth did you tie up the sale to those people? This was with an agent further down, and we're up here, and they're saying, well, who can we complain to?
And it's everything, isn't it? It's, in our industry, one of the things I train as a trainer is empathy. We have to empathize with our customers, and sometimes agents, I think we are guilty of being transactional, and quite often we're so busy and there's so many things we deal with, we don't often really take on board the human element sometimes. And it's something that we're very passionate about in my role, that makes sure that agents actually take a step back and realize that this is people's lives and homes. And when you deal with a really good agent, that's the thing that stands out. I think that there's a real care and passion about helping the consumer or the buyer or the seller get the job done well.
Well, once you're in a chain, you have the dream.
Yeah.
You'd rather take care of it.
So,
Yeah.
so it was really difficult because this was clients further down, and we weren't really able to help them. But you feel that pain because people have already moved in their head.
Yeah,
Yeah,
completely.
for sure.
Such an emotional thing. Even though I'm an estate agency expert, I've been doing this since 1994. When I moved house, it was the most emotional and stressful thing I've ever done, and it makes you think as a professional.
Brilliant. And so I was going to say, how do you think then consumers can try and navigate through this? How can they avoid those that are going to end up causing them complaints? What do they look for?
I think they need to look for the agent that they trust are a knowledgeable expert. And it's not about the cheapest fee. It's not about finding the buyer in a lot of instances. It's about the agent that can demonstrate that they're really good at navigating the problems in sales. We know traditionally that a third of sales fall through. So you should be paying an agent who is an expert at making sure they find the right buyer and protect that from happening. And that's what I'd be looking for as a consumer. The agent that I trust really knows what they're doing and has got my best interests at heart, but also is quick to pick up on the problems and solve those for me as well. And that is not all the industry. Not all the industry is good at that. And I think as a consumer, you've got to be very tough on questioning your agent and finding out what they're good at.
In terms of questions to ask, that is a question to ask. What percentage of your sales fall through?
Yeah, absolutely.
In the last year, I've had, this is the first one.
Right.
It's
And that's
the first one. And the reason why is because we take care and we listen and we try to match people and we manage people's expectations. But if you ask that question, they say, well, it's normal to have 30%. You go, well, what happens if mine is in the 30%? What do you do? That's the question to ask.
Yeah. It's not really about, sometimes things are out of your control. And also, a lot of the agents that I've been talking to recently have said that properties are getting downvalued a little bit because I think, banks and mortgage companies are very worried about people overcommitting to themselves.
Can you just explain downvaluing just very quickly? Because
so basically,
what does that mean?
if you agree an offer on a property at a certain price and then the surveyor comes around and says it's not worth that price, so therefore they're not going to lend you the money at that price. You have to then have a really good agent that will negotiate that for you. Quite often it happens, throughout the chain, but sometimes it doesn't. So it could be that, we've got to, like Rachel said, once somebody's had an offer agreed, they've kind of spent the money in their head and they've, bought, gone on to what they're going to be buying and, the new kitchen and all the rest of it. And then suddenly their house gets downvalued and they've got to readjust so it's managing people's expectations and really being on it. And as agents, when we're good agents, we have some really difficult conversations to have with people. And unfortunately, when agents don't have those conversations because they're terrified of having them, or they just don't really want, they just wait for it to happen and what's going to go on will happen, that's when sales will fall through. So you can't always, make it happen, but you can certainly do a blooming good job of being on top of it and doing your best to navigate that.
I think you go back a step with that though. That when downvaluing by banks happens because an agent has not correctly priced the property.
Traditionally, I think at the moment that we're finding a lot of were perhaps tied up before this has happened. That the mortgage companies have been really cautious, and understandably so, because a lot of people won't have the income that they thought they were going to have. 6 months.
Something to consider is when you are interviewing agents to see who you want to represent you in your sale. Sometimes the person who is giving you the highest possible selling price, that's where you need to think, well, would a bank agree that? Ask them the question, do you think a bank will agree it at that level, or are you just putting it at that level just to see what happens? Would you negotiate someone up to that level, and would you be happy with the sale going through at that level? So I think because there are three prices, and one is if everyone's high or everyone is low or in the middle. I think that's when as a consumer you can think, well, I want the most money for my house, but does that open other risks of downvaluing things down? So these are just questions to have in your own mind when you have agents telling you what they might sell your house for.
But you've got to go with common sense, because if an agent is overvaluing in order to get an instruction, which, let's face it, there's one of those agents in pretty much every town, I think, that we would come across, and they are not going to say no, that won't be valued at that. So there's so much
Comparable.
there's so much data that people can look up now, you know, and really you're looking at what other transactions have happened that are similar to yours. And we understand if you've got a big detached house in the middle of land, that's much harder. But if you've got a terraced house in a row of terraced houses, there's going to be other houses that have sold, and the sold prices are what matter, not what's on the market. And that you get that a lot with people. They go, oh, there's one down the road that's on the market, but it's been on the market for so many weeks, you know. So just make sure you're looking at sold prices, because that's what the banks are going to look at. That's what the surveyor's going to want to see when they come into the office. What other properties have been sold for this?
And I think as well, as a consumer, as long as you can afford and you have to maybe find a little bit more cash, think about, actually, it's £5,000 more that I've got to find or whatever. How does that actually fit in terms of the fact that I want this house long term, or what's it going to mean over 25 years if I had to invest a little bit more on my purchase price? It's not always about that kind of loggerhead situation that we sometimes get in as, I'm not paying that and I'm not accepting less than that. And there can sometimes be this real loggerheads, but when you break it down, actually, if you really thought about it, you know, it's not that huge a deal over the long run, but it's about explaining that to the consumer and saying, look, this is what you need to think about, and a good agent will do that.
And also, you think about how many times, once you've purchased the house and you've moved in 6 months later, half the time they can't even remember what they bought the house for, and yet they were arguing over a couple of £1,000. It's like, it's ridiculous, you know. You go, what did you buy it for? Oh, I can't remember now.
I've had somebody argue over whether the fridge was being left before, and the sale very nearly fell through just because of the fridge, you know. So sometimes it gets very emotional.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
So look, just
that will lead you on to your next point now.
Exactly right. So what we're going to, so it perfectly leads me on to the idea that so there are a number of different businesses out there right now, and a couple of them that spring to mind over the last couple of weeks. There's one called Strike that used to be known as House Simple, and what they're doing is they're selling, that they are advertising that they will sell your property for free. There is another new one that's out today called free.co.uk, who's a similar thing, and there are expectations that perhaps some of the other bigger agencies, something like Purple Bricks, for example, might also come into the market with an offering of that sort. So my question is really from a consumer perspective, look, this sounds like it's an amazing deal, right? If I don't have to pay the average of something like £3,400 to sell my property and I have to pay zero, that's got to be a good thing. So Rachel, is that not the case?
I would say buyer beware, because there is a common understanding across the internet that if you're not paying for it, you're the thing.
You're the product.
You're the product. Yeah.
If you can't see the product, you're it.
Yeah.
I think that's quite possible in this house sale as well, because if you imagine yourself as a house seller, all the needs that you might have in the coming months, and how your data could be monetized in order for someone to make money from all of those needs, that's when you become the product. You may sell your house, that's cool, but you're going to have 100 emails from everything from carpets to insurance to mortgage to solar panels to electricity companies, because as a home mover you have a lot of needs, and I would think that's where that freeness comes from, because they are going to be able to monetize on another side, which normal agents don't do.
And is that still is that not necessarily still a good deal? If I'm just getting loads of spam emails that I can just put into my junk?
Well, yes, it is, but will they negotiate the sale for you? And ultimately, what we've just been talking about holding sales together, about managing expectations, that's about personal relationships. That's not something you have with a portal. It's you may have a portal online, you can talk to it 24 hours a day, but at the end of the day, we have hands and we hold them, and that's how we move people forward.
Okay.
It's like anything that you do, if you want to do it yourself, which is what you're going to be doing when you're getting something for free. You know, someone will give you a listing somewhere and that's it. Pretty much, you're going to do your own viewings, your own negotiation, your own paperwork, your own chasing, and have all of the other bits which clearly these companies need to do in order to run as companies because they need to get money somewhere. Nobody gives something away and they're all sitting there working and getting nothing. Those staff don't get paid because obviously they're getting no income. So it's a common logic that they are getting money from somewhere, but also they'll be doing the minimal amount of work. So with anything, if you want to sell your car yourself and you don't want to use, whatever, a broker, if you want to get your divorce sorted yourself, then without a solicitor, then all these things can be done. You can, testify, stand up in court and talk for yourself. Anything that you do where you want to do it yourself, that's exactly the same as not having an estate agent or having a free service. That's what's going to be. So, I mean, there'll be some people that go, wow, yeah, I'll do it myself because, my house is the best thing since sliced bread. And if somebody doesn't want to pay me the full asking price, then, well, they can just go jump or whatever that's going to be. Yeah. But, come on, at the end of the day, everybody thinks their house is the best and every buyer thinks that they are in for having a bargain. So the whole point of an estate agent is to marry the two together and work it through until you get a fair agreement from people. So, that's what we do for our family.
I think if you're sitting there watching this and you've got a house that you can absolutely guarantee will be off the shelf and there'll be people fighting over it and you've got 10 buyers and those buyers will each push each one up and get you the best possible price, sell it for free. 99.9% of properties will not be that property. So you need to make sure that the estate agent is the person getting the buyer to offer a little bit more, persuading the person who didn't think they wanted to be on that street to look at that street, because we know, all of us around this group here know that buyers never buy what they think they want. I'm an expert in property. I didn't buy what I thought I wanted.
Yeah, likewise.
Our job as agents is to tease out what you want and suggest things to you. That's what a really, really good estate agent does. That's the selling element of our role. And because of that, any buyer who comes along, you've got to be sure that the estate agent is going to fight really hard to get you the best price from the buyer, because the buyer will want to pay the minimum price, and you can let them do that by signing up on a portal and let them pay that minimum price. But surely it's much better for you as a customer to let the agent push that price as hard as possible. And then going back to what we were saying before, make sure that when we do get that good price, that the sale doesn't fall through, because that's the biggest risk. And what happens if there's no one else to replace that buyer? A good agent will have somebody else potentially who will be interested in the property, or they'll have another solution, maybe like auction. It's all about the different advice. Not every property sells on the open market on private treaty. Some sell by auction. So what's the right solution to you as a seller? Because you might have a time pressure. You might be, emigrating to Australia in December, in which case you need to know your agent's going to get the job done by that date. So there's so many variables, I think, that make a big difference to you as the customer as to what you need. But that's where advice comes in. I'm not saying that selling it for free is not going to work for anybody. I'm just saying that the likelihood of it working is probably much lower to be sure you get the best price. And surely that's what we all want, isn't it? To feel we sold our property at the best price.
Also, is to underestimate what a good agent can do in your house. When I'm in someone's house, I'm selling that house. And I'm in that house because I love that house and I want to do my best for you. So I don't just open the door. I say, come in.
Kitchen.
We'll buy it.
Look at the Neff oven that slides underneath. I'm excited by houses and I'm excited by selling. So when I'm in a house, buyers think it's a great house to be in. Now, you can do that in your own house, but you look a bit weird. I don't, because I'm in sales.
Yeah.
It's really, really difficult to market your own things. It's really hard when someone's walking out your house. As agents, we know that some people walk in the door and think it's not for me, but they might go through the motions, and so we can judge that. Or, they might not be super chatty, but we know that we can get something out of them, or perhaps it will take a few days and we can be in touch with them. If you're the person that's in that house and they come through the door and you're going to think, oh, they don't like my house, then you're probably going to rush them through and get them out the door without actually giving them a chance when they might have liked it. Or you're going to probably chat the ear off somebody that actually, the minute they walked in, didn't want it. It's a waste of your time.
And that's
there's a cost to that.
Yeah, so I was going to say that's the other thing to ask your agent. One of the biggest reasons for complaints is communication. One of the most important things that agents do well is viewing feedback. After that person who's lied blatantly to your face and told them that they love your property actually rings up the agent and says, I hate it, you need to know that, because I sold mine recently and I didn't get viewing feedback from one of the agents. And I was sitting there on tenterhooks thinking, when are they going to ring me? When are they going to ring me? I want to know what the situation is. And I think that is such an important part. And that's the service thing. That's the first question I'd ask an agent, apart from how many sales fall through, is, are you good at viewing feedback? How do you do it? Because it's just text. I'm not interested.
And that filter, obviously having an independent third party as that filter between the buyer and the seller is really quite important as well.
That is what agent means. We are between the buyer and the seller. That's the definition of agent. And I think that's where it's a bit tricksy that they call themselves full service estate agents, because they're not actually between you. They're leaving you to deal with the buyer.
Or you pay more for the bits that you want to add on, don't you? That's the other thing, isn't it? It's free.
Oh, wanted that service. Oh, right, that's an extra. Oh, it's not free anymore, but
and your time costs as well, right? You know, actually doing all this stuff yourself is you not doing other stuff, so there's an opportunity cost there. And if you end up getting £5,000 less for your property because you haven't been able to negotiate it, saving £3,500 is not a good way of going about it.
Absolutely. And again, I think it goes back to what I said before about the time pressure. If you're not in any rush and you don't really mind, then fine. But if you know you've got a deadline, or you've seen the house of your dreams and you've got a real ambition to that, or you know you need to get your school application in by a certain date and you need to move, you've got to rely on an expert to give you the advice. And that's not necessarily, we'll get you the best price. It's, if you want to sell by here, this point, you've got to think about your pricing in this way to achieve that. And that's when real advice is priceless, really. And a good agent really does know that, and they will know their market.
Fantastic.
Knowing the local market really matters.
Brilliant. So look, I'm very mindful that we are, as ever, starting to come towards the end of our time, that we've just rushed through, but really, really great comments, and thanks so much for all you've put in so far. I wanted to just touch on one of the kind of the fun stories that we've had this week about gardens. All right, south-facing gardens, and how much extra they add to the value of your property. Now, Rightmove has come out today and said that it's something like £22,000 or something, 14% to have a south-facing garden. What's your kind of take in the conversations that you've had, all the properties you've been involved in selling and so on? What's the thing that kind of really drives up people's interest in properties? Are there balconies a thing, or attics a thing? What really appeals?
I think COVID's made a big change. You know, I think outside space for people is huge. But it's interesting, again, another reason to choose an expert agent. You know, are they taking into consideration that you have the south-facing garden, which we know should get more money? Are they taking into account what's popular in your area, that most buyers are looking for a 3-bedroom semi with a garden, and they're not looking for the 2-bed flat? All of that knowledge is very valuable to you as a customer, because it gives you an expectation as to how quickly your house might sell, or what problems you might come across. It made me laugh, that article, Mal, because the article was on the website with this, you know, south-facing gardens are worth more. And then underneath, on this editorial page, was exactly the same photo in an article that obviously had been written a few months ago saying south-facing gardens are not worth more money. And I thought, oh, there's journalism for you, isn't it?
It's stats, isn't it? Numbers.
Because if you're living in England, most of the time, let's face it, it's raining. So does it matter if you've got a south-facing garden?
Exactly.
You've got a rain.
Here in the south, it does matter.
Of course.
Does it? Yes, that's Southampton.
I mean, you can bake. You can bake. Yeah. You need a garden with some shade. We sell bungalows in a tiny place called Porchester, which is famous for its castle. You can have a north-facing garden in Porchester that is baked by the sun, because the houses are, because it's a bungalow, sun comes up.
No roof.
But if you have a south-facing conservatory, it's intolerable.
Really?
So I think it depends on where you are in the country. Some people would say, yeah, if you're going to have a south-facing garden in some areas of the south coast, you're going to have to put some quite industrial, reflective, and
wow.
I would scream for that kind of wall.
And also, another
baking out.
that you need to ask your agent: do they know whether you've got a south-facing garden, because how many blooming agents don't even know where south is?
I do, because it's for the skiers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've got to kind of
Yeah, you're all
something you
right,
can check
but
all the
I'm
time.
telling
And I know where the sun rises and sets. And I know the good times to take photos of your house. That's why agents need to know.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
if you've got a south-facing garden, it's really quite difficult to take pictures of the front of the house. So you need to be going to that property really early in the morning or in golden hour. So this is where knowing which direction of the house does matter, right from a marketing perspective, let alone negotiating a price. Parking is the thing down here.
Is it?
Off-road parking will add more to your selling price than your garden, left, right, up, down, or whichever way.
Wow, fascinating. I remember when we were at Zoopla back in the day, and we had a story about the number 13 on your house, and that actually decreased, according to our stats, value of your property by about £8,000. And I always remember, like, that actually caused people to put like 11B instead of, or 11A instead of 13. So there are numerous factors that can really impact on the value of your property that aren't necessarily visible to you yourself, just because this is such a rare transaction for you, right?
And that you can't see on a Rightmove page or a Zoopla page. You need to actually speak to an agent, get the information, go and see the property. And I think one thing I would say to consumers is don't rely on the portals to do all your research for you. Get out and about, get in the car, chuck the petrol in, jump on the bus, go and get out and about and really get to know the area.
Yeah, one of my very early agents here to help videos is about that. Finding your perfect home from your sofa, I think it was called.
No, you can't do that.
There are online tools you can use for a start. Get on your street view, go and see where the shadows are, see how much parking there is, and then go and have a drive. There's so much you can find out yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's part of the fun, isn't it? It's supposed to be fun, enjoy it.
Take the day out and off you go.
Yeah. Well,
that's where board matters, because boards do.
It does, doesn't it? Oh gosh,
yeah.
That's another argument. Oh, I don't want to board up because someone will know I'm moving.
Board. Always have a board.
They can see like the estate agent coming in. They're not going to see like people turning up for viewings. That's like
good. Tell their friends. Yeah.
Oh dear.
Board wars. Brilliant. Well, listen, guys, it's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
for your time, as ever. These guys, by the way, guys out there, they've given their time up for free. They're brilliant. They're agents here to help is all about giving consumers information about what's going on out there, trying to give you the information that's going to help you cut through a lot of the noise that's out there. So yeah, thanks, guys. You've been great. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and if you are watching it as a consumer, please share. Please get other people that you know to have a look, because we do want to make sure that people are educated when they are looking to buy or sell, which can make it a lot less stressful than if you are not. So
that's what we're here for.
Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jane. Thanks, guys. See you then.
Bye.
Cheers, all of us. See you.